Hello and welcome to the Chiaroscuro Jazz Podcasts. I'm George Graham, Director of Artistry and Repertoire for the Venerable Jazz label, which for over a half-century has been presenting music from some of the world's great jazz musicians. In this series, we'll have conversations with some of today's outstanding players and their thoughts on some of the artists who have recorded for Chiaroscuro. This time, we continue our conversation with drummer, band leader, and educator Sherrie Maricle, who for over 30 years has led the Diva Jazz Orchestra, the all-women ensemble who have played all over the world at venues such as Carnegie Hall, Jazz at Lincoln Center, the Kennedy Center in Washington, the Hollywood Bowl, plus jazz festivals in Switzerland, Italy, Canada, Colombia, Jamaica, and Finland, among others. With a doctorate from New York University, Dr. Maricle also leads spin-off groups 5-Play, the Diva Trio, and the 3D Jazz Trio. Last time, Sherrie talked about her start in music and how she felt she was destined to be a jazz drummer from a very early age, leading up to the formation of the Diva Orchestra 30 years ago. This time we pick up the conversation talking about her work in education. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about your educational aspect because you teach, and I know several years you were involved with the jazz camp at the Delaware Water Gap Celebration of the Arts, and I guess you're pretty active in keeping the tradition going to the next generation.
Yeah, I was, one of the things that turned me towards teaching it, I was working, I mentioned before, in a lot of these wedding bands. Even when I was first moved to New York, I played all the time, and I would move my drums around, and I found myself being a little bit annoyed and resentful, even though I was getting paid well. I was like, you know what? I do not want to play Celebration again, by Kool and the Gang, even though I actually love that song, especially now that I don't have to play it every week. But I decided that one clear point, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'd rather focus on music I'm really passionate about and see if I can teach in that regard. And I was teaching a little bit, and I like it. So I just started focusing a bit on that. And I ended up, as my teaching fellowship at NYU, I ended up teaching there for a number of years. Even after I was done with my doctorate, I stayed there, for 15 years altogether as an adjunct. And I did a lot of different classes. And I clearly I like grassroots things like the jazz, like the Coda Camp jazz in the Delaware Water Gap that Phil Wood started, and Rick Chamberlain, just ways to give back to the community. And it could be bigger communities or small, and just keeping that tradition of jazz alive and giving young people an opportunity to experience it with professional players and people who have a passion, and aptitude for teaching as well. Because not all players can be good teachers, And so I feel like I feel lucky because I like doing both, and I always want to share any information I can to keep passion and excitement going about this music. That I keep saying the tradition of the music, because some things now that that's people call jazz, like they always have. I mean, whoever's putting the labels on things, jazz is a lot of different things. But there are many things, even by really known jazz artists, that I would never call them jazz ever, that I hear on the radio. There's just no possibility to me some of these things are jazz. But I feel like a jazz snob and purist, but I don't care. Now I'm old. I'm saying exactly what I think.
Of your students, have there been some that have impressed you and might have gone on to professional careers?
Yeah, one of the students I had at New York University, his name was Jim Buck, and he moved a lot of places, but he ended up in Las Vegas, and he's one of the most working musicians out there, and not only on drums, but he also plays guitar and bass and a number of things. And he said, I'm still in touch with him quite a bit, but I taught him since he was in high school, almost up to his master's degree. And I said, you got to go take more drum lessons from somebody else. You can't have the same teacher for a million years. But anyway, he's wildly successful, not in the grand scheme, like he's on maybe he wouldn't be at Madison Square Garden, but the goal, is to be a working musician, and he plays all kinds of music, and he's very, very successful. Then I have a couple of other kids that have just gone on to, really great gigs and touring and playing on Broadway and touring in Broadway shows, and just, a bunch of different rock, pop, Broadway, jazz stuff that they're really happy And like I said, nobody maybe that who would be a household name yet, but amazing players, amazing players.
The world
So I'm
is
proud of that.
the world is full of those great jazz musicians everywhere you look. I think, that.
Yeah.
And there's only so many slots in the public eye. I think that can be filled. You know what I mean?
Well, that's one of the things that I still, it's one of those mysteries to me that, like, well, for example, the Deer Head Inn and the Delaware Water Gap, amazing. Like every town in the world could have not the Deer Head Inn, but more of a community place where that kind of music like that on that level, because there's great musicians everywhere. You're going to have I wish there was a way to implement some kind of national program and every town that can fill out an application and you get funding to have your jazz club for a year or something, just to get it rolling and see if the community will support it. Because that's the thing now, everybody with their streaming and their earbuds, you got to get people out of their houses and into the clubs. But I wish that could happen. So to your point, I got to tell all of my students too, I said, the one thing that you have to think about in jazz, especially, you have to try to create a unique voice, because nobody wants to hear you play Take the A Train unless you do something different to it, or moves people in some way. It's not about the notes. It's not about the written notes on the piece of paper, not about transcribing somebody else's solo. It's about what you're going to put that somebody will say, oh, I never heard it like that. And still, somehow be able to enjoy it as a piece of jazz and not transforming it into a heavy metal piece or something else.
Right.
Which people also try to do. And that's, I guess when I say that, it makes me laugh, because a lot of my students now love heavy metal music and those metal bands, and clearly rock and pop is hip hop and rap is just, it's isn't it like 90% of the music business? Is jazz still like 2% or 1% or something?
I don't know. I've lost track of that.
Some
Everybody's
small
got
little tidbit.
Yeah, we're just a little niche in the in the big world of things.
Yeah, so that's why I say don't turn A Train into a metal tune. But you can make $1 million, do it. Stanley Kay, who we talked about, the founder of Diva / former manager of Buddy Rich and great drummer, used to say, you really, you have no business arguing with success. Even if you don't like their music, if someone's out there and I don't know, they're drawing 50,000 people to their concert, they're making some people happy. They're moving somebody some way. So I love that he said that. You can't argue it. It kind of keeps you really, what people love it. So that's the kind of thing I always try to keep in mind as I progress my way, try to figure out how not to have a nervous breakdown in the music business. Keep on the path of and what Maurice Hines told me, he was like, baby, you got to tell the truth. Don't try to BS anyone. When you're not yourself, everybody knows it, and it's not good. You have to always tell your own truth, whatever it is, artistically and musically. Just be real, because the minute you try to be something you're not is when you can't sustain it. I love that advice.
Right. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your different projects. There's Diva Orchestra that's been going now for 30 years, and maybe we can talk a bit about some of the memorable gigs. But you also have Five Play and the 3D Jazz Trio, which I had the great pleasure of working with you in doing your first album.
That was so great. We talk about that all the time. I was just with them this past weekend. And also, actually, there's all the diva names are confusing, but we also have the rhythm section from the big band. We put out a record, and that was just the Diva Jazz Trio.
Right.
And so we just did a Errol Gardner project with that group of all Errol Gardner music.
With Tomoko Ono and
Noriko.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also an Artemis, Noriko.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But anyway, Diva, I love, since I told you when I was 11, big band is really like the foundation of everything I love about the music. So I will, it's always going to be rolling as long as I'm steering the ship. We're going to keep going. And we've had everything memorable. The first time we went to Europe, of course, was to play at the Pori Jazz Festival. I think it was in 1995 or maybe 97 to Pori, Finland. So the first time you get out of your comfort zone and start touring, it's amazing. Whether you're in a huge concert venue with 20, we've played like for 20 or 25,000 people, some of the big European festivals, playing the Hollywood Bowl for 17,000 people. we've done three times. That's incredible. So it played the 25th anniversary of the Kennedy Center with Dee Dee Bridgewater and Billy Taylor and that's, I mean, those large scale gigs and playing and recording with Nancy Wilson, unbelievably great, like so great. And she's so cool. And most recently, since October of 2022, we've been touring with the Manhattan Transfer. And that's, I got to tell you guys something. It's not like any other jazz tour I've been on, because it's the Manhattan Transfer. So when I tell you that it's the buses are great, the hotels are great, the food is crazy great. They're great people, all four of them, and their crew and their music director, Yaron Gershovsky. Those guys are all amazing, wonderful to work with. And we're just, they're retiring. So we are actually heading out in December to do their final concert with them at Disney Hall. It's going to be that's it. They're not going to perform anymore. And it's been iconic to do that. So touring with them, like I mentioned before, I want to go on the road like crazy. One of Diva's most fun things for me was in the 90s, late 90s, we were working with, it was called Community Concerts. It was through Columbia Artists. We did 10 weeks of one-nighters through the Midwest. 10 weeks. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. It was so good for the band. I mean, I think that's, as much as people might have, like, how 1 week it's like, I love you. The next week it's like, I hate you. Get away from me. Because you're crammed on the bus together. But that was incredible musically and artistically for us to be together that much. And after that, then, like, there's a couple months off. Then we did 8 weeks through the Pacific Northwest, also for community concerts. And I don't know if anything like that exists anymore, but Columbia Artists had that program, and they would send music to, like I was saying before, almost to communities that didn't have major performing arts venues. So you might be at the school, you might be at the community center, some of them had small theaters, but that was one of my very favorite things we did, to be able to have that experience of just the constant playing. There's so many things. And the Diva Jazz Trio, a 3D jazz trio, played Nancy Wilson's 80th birthday. Nancy asked for us. Which was quite amazing and humbling and thrilling all at the same time. And then there's been just really like small funny things with the trio playing. I remember Tina Turner was at Radio City Music Hall, and Stanley Kay's friend was the director of Radio City, and he's like, "Hey, bring your trio and play Tina Turner's cocktail party before the show." So I was in there. I love Tina Turner, and she walked by me, and I almost had a heart attack. Talk about charisma pouring off of somebody. Oh my God, that woman was just unbelievable. She was like a contained volcano of awesome. So I remember those funny things. And then we had a rehearsal. Speaking of like the pop and rock stuff, we were rehearsing at the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, and Bon Jovi came to our rehearsal, and Noriko, the bass player, turned red. Like, she loves Bon Jovi. She loves Bon Jovi. And I'm like, huh? Then everyone started singing Living on a Prayer, like Bon Jovi tunes, but just so like funny little things you never expect, like weird. I just like, Noriko, you love Bon Jovi? What? No way. Because you're thinking jazz people are all serious and can only love Oscar Peterson and isn't it? It's like, nope, Bon Jovi, Tina Turner. But that, some of those gigs are just really memorable. And then the small little the tiniest, we were in this really small club in Germany one time, and so small. It was like the size of Smalls probably in New York, and the people were crammed, like people, somebody could have their elbow on my hi-hat. But the crowd was so great, and they were just screaming like people's names in the band, and they were so enthusiastic, and it was so energized. It made us like play in a really special way, because we wanted them to be so happy. And then probably one of the most amazing things Five Play got to do is we got a State Department tour grant to go to Vietnam. And I was not paying attention to the experience, but it was the information besides the logistics of it were kind of, I'm going to say a little bit vague, not realizing that we were the only American band ever in the history of this country to go to some of these cities, ever. And we got off the plane, and there were literally people with signs with our pictures on it, like at a sports stadium. We were flabbergasted. Like, I was like, oh my, what? Jazz people don't get this. What's happening here? It was so profound. And we did all like big cities, like the Sea Festival, and like these major, like huge stages with a couple of Vietnamese pop stars. and did like a couple of pop tunes. And then we played a bunch of jazz. And then we did a cultural exchange. We turned a couple of Vietnamese folk tunes into swing. We did like Tomoko Ono did an arrangement of I think the song was called Bayo Dot Ma Choi. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but we turned it into like a bassy kind of a swing tune. We recorded it live at the Deerhead Inn. that was fun, but we played a lot of orphanages and different places there. And their cultural exchange, everybody wanted to sing Happy Birthday and Jingle Bells. So that was so we played that and let the audiences sing. It was really cool, but I don't know if I can't even tell you how astonishing it was to get off of an airplane and see people with signs, and in the audience too. Like Noriko would play a solo and some people would have a sign, "We love you, Noriko." I'm like, what's happening here? Can you imagine that in the United States, like a jazz fan doing that? It's kind of hilarious. But then being interviewed by a lot of the government people and some, U.S. ambassador and things like that. And a Japanese ambassador was there as well, because Noriko and Tomoko are Japanese. And just some of that was, I feel like I was a little bit stupid not to understand that we were doing something like really representing the United States. And not that I could have prepared any better, but I didn't have that depth of awareness. And when I got there, I got it really quickly. And I was like, wow, that was extraordinary to be able to do that. Really something, so that was real memorable. And there's just, and we got to go to Israel when Anat Cohen was in Five Play for the 10 years she spent in Diva. We played at the Caesarea Jazz Festival in Israel, and we all stayed a couple extra days so we could go visit Anat's family. And I remember Anat being all like, "Oh my God, my world is colliding," because all of her American friends are now suddenly in Israel, and it was really fun. Those things are great. We sort of had in our mind how fun it would be to go to everybody's home country, because we had the people in Diva were from Israel, Austria, Australia, Italy, like just a lot of different countries, in Japan, which we luckily got to go there. And just, it was sort of on our roadmap. That's just a funny inside band goal.
Well, maybe you'll make it sooner or later.
So yeah, I mean, I Diva, clearly we will always be needing, and men have played with the band too, by the way. Hasn't been exclusively. Anat Cohen's brother toured with us, went on a little tour with us. If a woman doesn't pop up who immediately is on our radar screen, then gender can't replace talent or ability.
Well, you did do that album with some male guest instrumentalists on there, I think.
Oh yeah, Diva and the Boys.
Right.
For the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild. Claudio Roditi, that was his last recording.
Oh,
That was amazing. I love him. That was extraordinarily great. And Marty Ashby, who's the director of the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, him and his brother Jay, is a great trombonist and writer, were on that. And Ken Poplowski. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, really great. I also love one thing something in this new Diva recording we just did. I wanted to honor a lot of the vocalists that we've played, because it was a really important part of our history. So a friend of mine named Sue Giles sang with us, and I wanted to record Here's to Life, but Marlena Shaw's version. She's one of my favorite singers, and she just had a birthday. So that was one of the most fun gigs with Diva, was playing at Scullers in Boston. We were supposed to be there a couple of nights, and there was a major blizzard. So we played the first set, and the club kicked everybody out, but they left us in there with like 10 open bottles of wine. And they said, "You guys can stay here as long as you want," because we were still staying in the hotel. And Marlena hung out with us. We had a big jam session. I was sitting at the bar with Marlena, and I said, she says, "What songs you were talking about tunes we like?" And I said, "Oh my God, I love It Could Happen to You." And she just like just sang It Could Happen to You into my ear at the bar. And then I love her. So she's one of the most soulful, great people ever. So talking about nice memories, but being trapped in Boston in a major blizzard at Scullers Jazz Club with Marlena Shaw was definitely fun. And work with Nancy Wilson, I mentored also Indescribable Goddess and Carmen Bradford, and just we've been really, really fortunate to be able to play with some incredible singers, and Ann Hampton Calloway, and so hey, knock on wood.
All right. Well, thank you, Sherrie. You've some great stories. Any closing thoughts you'd like to convey? Maybe perhaps as relating to some of the artists who have recorded for chiaroscuro you might have worked with.
Yeah. Well, the parting words are for a label as great as chiaroscuro that's keeping this tradition alive and keeping swing going in such a profound and important and great way for the entire field of jazz. And it's the foundation that everything's built on, and it's got the depth and the soul and the groove and the grit and the grace that makes the music amazing. You guys have captured all of those things with your recordings. It's the real essence of the music, and no one's ever going to play like or better than the great Phil Woods or Michael Moore or Roger Kellaway or Bucky Pizzarelli or any of those great players that we've been talking about. So everybody, buy as many chiaroscuro recordings as you can. They're great. And and it was just coming to mind also the very great, I know the drummer Louis Bellson recorded with you also, and he actually showed me how to play a drum roll at a big percussion convention. He was the most generous, kind guy. And also, everybody knows he was the most innovative one with his double bass drums with Louis Bellson. With Duke Ellington in the 30s. Louis with talk about heavy metal, 1930. Right. But he was such a kind guy and really wanted to keep the tradition of big band drumming going and all. And I love him. So wow, it's great that you guys got to, have him captured on, I'm going to say vinyl, even though is it vinyl? Do you guys still do vinyl?
Yeah, well, we put out a couple of vinyl reissues, mainly of 70s fusion material from the group Tarika album and also a James Mason album, a somewhat obscure keyboard player, but there's a piece on that that's been widely sampled in the hip-hop world. And so that's seen a good deal of new life on that basis.
Oh, that's cool. That reminded me of, remember the group Run DMC?
Oh, yeah.
I remember, I think it was on the Grammys one. They actually sampled some Clark Terry doing something, and Clark appeared with them on the Grammys, I think. Unless I'm mixing up some stories. But anyway, I love people can sample all they want, as long as they, do the proper nod and credit.
A big thanks to Sherrie Maricle for sharing her unique story. You can find more information about Dr. Maricle at divajazz.com. Let's go out with a chiaroscuro recording featuring Louis Bellson. This is a quintet recorded at one of the floating jazz festivals in 1994. It's a tune called For Diz. Four Diz from the chiaroscuro release Salute by the Louis Bellson Quintet, featuring Bobby Shu on trumpet, George Young on sax, Willie Pickens on piano, Keter Betts on bass, and Louis Bellson on the drums. You can find information on this and over 100 other titles on chiaroscuro on our website at chiaroscurojazz.org, where you can find more of these podcasts. And why not subscribe to the Chiaroscuro podcast wherever you get your podcasts? Join us next time for another conversation with one of today's jazz personalities. This is George Graham, your producer for the Chiaroscuro podcast series. Our co-producer is Jim Della Croce. Thanks for sharing your time with us.